Hello everyone, my report will be the continuation of Ms. Ramos' report about the 6 principles of teaching by James L. Mursell. Now, the fourth principle is principle of individualization. Fifth, principle of sequence. Last is principle of evaluation. Principle of individualization. It is an instruction that must progress in terms of the learner's own purposes, aptitudes, abilities, and experimental procedures. So, the individualized teaching must according to students' ability and the individual characteristics of the students. And it also provides support for the students' needs, interests, abilities, capabilities in terms of their further development. In the process of planning, the individualized lesson plans, individuality and uniqueness of the student are taken into account. These are the scales of application. First, individualization through different performance in uniform tasks. Second, individualization through homogeneous grouping. Third, individualization through contract plan. Fourth, individualization through individual instruction. Fifth, individualization through large units of optimal related activity. And last one is individualization through individual undertakings stemming from and contributing to the joint undertaking of the group of learners. First one is individualization through different performance in uniform tasks. So the teacher sets the lesson format as part of his classroom structuring and sees to it that while task is the same at all, he offers varied ways of doing the task according to learners' aptitude, interest, and capabilities. So, while the objective for a particular lesson is aimed at skills development, very likely the skills developed or acquired may also vary, resulting from the difference between the learner's attitudes and interests. Second is individualization through homogeneous grouping. Learners vary in age, ability, and sex, and classrooms tend to lean toward homogeneity. Except for some learners, variables like race or social class, which educators find not acceptable in the homogeneous grouping, are acknowledged by educators and are considered an advantage for effective instruction. So for instance, in a system called ability grouping, learners are grouped according to intellectual ability. So this has marked well in the matter of providing adequate preparation for college. Life, for example, life for whatever specialization is asked for schools which have practiced this 4 years and were found to have worked well in terms of achievement on the part of the learners. In Oriental Mindoro National High School, Calapan City, science classes are a homogeneous group consisting of learners who are categorized according to intellectual ability and interest in pursuing a science curriculum. Third is individualization through contract plan. One of the guiding principles of individualization asserts that the individual must be the focus in the planning and delivery of services and support. Each person has the basic human rights to have his capabilities, needs, and interest used as basis for planning, delivery of services, and support to the individual. So, applied to effective instruction, a learner enjoys the right to have his unique capabilities, needs, and interests recognized are basis for a contract plan. So a contract plan, when you say contract plan, it is maybe a plan of study where the learner is provided a set of activities to do and a time limit to accomplish the specific task. And the plan may involve encounters between the learner and the teacher to evaluate the progress of the assigned task, which normally is structured according to the learner's interests and abilities. And the concept of independent learning, where learners are provided self-learning kits or modules, would amount to a contract plan specifying what should be accomplished at a given time. Next is individualization through individual instruction. So this is called as for a person-centered planning for learning tasks normally adapted to the level of capability of the learner. So the class is usually limited in number to provide for close monitoring by the teacher who acts as a facilitator. So in some instances, individual instruction is done through self-learning kits to be accomplished by the learners but supplemented by a scheduled one-on-one encounter with the teacher facilitator to check on the progress of the work activity. Now, the remedial instruction given to low-performing learners outside of class hours may also fall under individual instruction. So the essence of an individual instruction is to make sure that it becomes effective on individual abilities and effective because instruction meets the objective set for a particular lesson based on the individual abilities and aptitudes. So this kind of instruction is also open to experimental procedures in instruction with the end in view of achieving the best possible outcomes in terms of learning for the individual. Individualization through large units with optimal related activity. So this is the kind of instruction where large topics or big blocks are divided into smaller units and which could be completed within a specified time frame. So the members of the group are given topics to engage in individual activities for as long as these are related to the learning tasks at hand and that the activities will contribute to the accomplishment of the assigned class activity. So an example is the Morrisonian technique or unit method. So unit method, it is when the teacher divides the subject to be taught into different units first and then teaches it one by one. So textbooks may come with units to make teaching and learning easy. And next is individualization through individual undertakings stemming from and contributing to the joint undertaking of the group of learners. So in this instruction, it is done to ensure cooperative learning while the group works on a specific learning activity. Okay, so the task is divided among the members so that each member has a particular activity to work on, so that in the end, the group output becomes a product of concerted effort of the individual member of the group, and each member is also given the option to choose what specific task to do according to his ability and interest, and eventually contributes to the realization of the objectives set for the assigned activity. Examples are cooperative learning, group projects, in group study, and others. So the fifth principle is principle of sequence. So it an instruction depends on effective ordering of series of learning tasks. So sequence, it is a movement from meaningless to emergence of meaning, from immediate toward remote, from concrete toward symbolic, from crude to the discriminating. So um, hence sequence is a process of transformation. So it is the way how the teacher can make an arrangement on how her or his instruction be effective. Now we have the scales of application. First is sequence through logical succession of blocks of content, so lesson and courses. So teachers get disappointed with students who seem not able to apply the principles which have already been taught in class. So one way to increase the chance of um, making learners absorb the lesson, whether principles, theories, or mechanics, is to provide a learning sequence where comprehension or understanding of whatever is introduced is reinforced. So the reinforcement will also provide development and acquisition of skills necessary for building up understanding and translating concepts into actual practices. So, next is sequence through nothing, learning lesson or course together by introductions, previews, pre-tests, and reviews. So, in this sequence, this is done by supplementing discussion, studies, analysis of lesson by introduction, and reviews related to the lesson. So this will affect an easier understanding of the lessons through the establishment of possible connections between the current of the past lessons. Third is the sequence organized in terms of readiness. So it is when how the teacher organized her or his instruction for the students to with the students' readiness and for that to meet the goal or the objective of the teacher. And fourth is the sequence organized in terms of lines, emerging meaning. So it is this calls for planning specific learning tasks that will depend on the ability of the learners to give meaning to specific situations and deduced impressions from whatever is read to think of possibilities as an end result of doing the activity. So in teaching poetry, so for instance, teachers can focus at first on the simple analysis of the prose content. It is seeing and reading the poem as it is and drawing out the facts as presented. The second step will be more complicated, as in looking for the theme on the message the author wants to convey. The third step will involve a second level reading where the learner through his analysis will generate his own meaning or his own interpretation of the piece through the symbols used. So that is how you organize in terms of lines, emerging meanings. So for scale 1, these are the learning sequence can pass through the following stages. So define the principle. So what is it? What does it do? How does it apply? And second is define the principle within models. So where is it? How does it differ? And then generate the principle. It is how do I do it? How do I apply it? And receive feedback. It is one, how did I do it? What did I accomplish? And then define principle or practice. So when does the principle change? Why does the principle change? Or what variations, if ever, can I make use of? So learning sequence provides for a gradual increase in difficulty and complexity. As it is much simpler to find something than to do it. So it is simpler to look for models or prototypes than to think of variations. Variations and deviations. And learning sequence calls for doing simpler tasks before moving on to more challenging or complicated tasks. Okay, now the skill 2 is noting learning of a particular lesson by. So first, that is supplementing discussion. And then Second is studies, analysis of lesson by introduction, reviews related to the lesson. So this will affect and easier understanding of the lesson through the establishment of possible connections between the current and the past lesson. So the for example, the pre-test or diagnostic test intended for evaluation of how will the learners have absorbed previous materials taught will facilitate easy adjustments on the learning process to be adapted by the teachers, and such will provide a strong basis for the ordering of the learning tasks. So scale 3. So it is about the um, readiness, terms of readiness. So effective instruction is achieved if the teacher is able, so we can meet this objective, effective instruction, if the teacher is able to order or set the particular learning task according to the readiness of the learners to understand or assimilate whatever material is to be given to them. So it is therefore important for the teacher to measure the to measure okay it is important for the teacher to measure the level of readiness or preparedness of the learners to understand simple to complex materials for instruction. And the last principle is principle of evaluation. So, learning is heightened by a valid and discriminating appraisal of all its aspects. So, when we say evaluation is a component of effective instruction, it is necessary to determine whether the objectives of instruction have been carried out and learning or understanding of lesson has taken place. It is only by knowing the effectiveness of instruction that teachers can determine the value or worth of the lesson, as well as the specific procedures that go with the teaching learning process. And it will also involve a type of evaluation that requires the analysis and other factors that makes up the educational system. So in this part, it will be the summative information or data of the student or teacher. It is when the teacher knows if her or his students learn a lot from him or her, and how the effectiveness of instruction she have, and if he or she meet his or her objectives or goal in this instruction or lesson. So we have 3 types of evaluation. First one is the diagnostic evaluation, formative evaluation, and the summative evaluation. So first is diagnostic evaluation. It is done at the beginning of the unit or course to determine the different levels where students can be grouped, whether slow, average, and fast. So it is when the in this process it is when the teacher is able to determine the inadequacies or difficulties that learners are into and propose remedial measures to solve the existing problems. So planning becomes more purposeful in that the teacher is provided a ready reference for the planned remediation. Second is formative evaluation. So the phase of evaluation where what the teacher does in the course of his teaching and what he is to do next are given focus. So it is when this evaluation is intended to improve the delivery of instruction in the classroom. And also it is in other words, this is a process of quality control It is designed to examine whatever deficiencies there in the process of instruction so that necessary adjustment can be made for successful results. And the teacher therefore evaluates where the plan for the day is succeeding or carried out as planned. So a short test after the lesson proper is an example to find out how will the learners have observed the lesson. And then but in some cases, the teacher asks the learners to summarize the important points discussed, and based on the results, he can do revisions or modifications in the method of instruction. And a formative evaluation is usually done in the pilot stage or at any point of the various stages of the instruction process, because this will help not only to determine how much learning has been achieved through instruction, but also how to get rid of unintended outcomes, if any. And to this end, it becomes a very important aspect of the monitoring process. Last is the summative evaluation. Uh, in this phase of evaluation calls for summing up or pertinent data related to the performance of the individual learners. So it is from the word itself. It is called for summing up or for the total of. So at the end of the for an instance, at the end of the year, the final ratings of the learners will quantify how much learning is achieved to merit a promotion. And the focus of summative evaluation is the effectiveness of instruction, which is reflected by quantitative expressions in terms of grades. And this is actually the end point of the evaluation phase, where a total picture of the teaching learning process can be projected. From there, baseline data on the quality of instruction can be had to provide measures or even decisions on how to effect change for optimum results in instruction. So everything will be done in summative evaluation. So that would be all. Thank you so much for listening.